So the first question I'm asking is, will Russia actually start targeting NATO vehicles? I'm asking that is because there's so much mind games and saber rattling going on. One has to ask that question. Question number two, can NATO sit silent, or will it be forced to actually respond if its assets, if its vehicles, if its soldiers come under direct attack by Russian forces? Question number three that we're asking, will this mean that NATO steps directly into combat? NATO has so far said it has no intention to get into this fight directly with Russia, but if they are hit, if Russia actually strikes their assets, do they really have a choice? Number four, will this force the United States to rethink its entire hands-off policy? Because many of these supply convoys are US-sponsored. So will this mean the US also is put on notice and will have to step in? Number five, is this the biggest escalation since the invasion began? We've seen a lot of nuclear saber rattling, but will this mean NATO becomes part of the actual fight? And finally, as a disclaimer, are these the usual Russian mind games we've seen so plentifully during this conflict, or does Russia really have a plan to hit NATO targets within Ukraine, those supply trucks that are there? India Today's Rajesh Pawar joins me live from Kyiv, Ukraine, and Geeta Mohan has been traveling in Crimea. She's the only journalist reporting from there. Rajesh, quickly want to come to you first. A lot of warnings have been issued in the 71 days of this war. There's a lot of muscle flexing, a lot of saber rattling, lots of ultimatums being issued. But this particular warning that's come in from the Russian defense minister is particularly alarming, because we do know that NATO sends large quantities of arms and equipment into Ukraine across the Poland border. Russia says we are going to start targeting those convoys. Do you see that as possible, or is this another mind game?
Look, Shiv, let me put the whole thing in perspective. Right from the beginning of the war, Russia ensured that there is a complete naval blockade of Ukraine, be it in Sea of Azov or be it in Black Sea. Secondly, they also made entire Ukrainian Air Force dysfunctional. So the only way the equipment which is coming from America and NATO countries which can reach Ukraine is through the land borders, and primarily through Poland. And all this equipment which comes, it comes to Lviv first, and from there onwards to Dnipro and towards eastern Ukraine, where Ukrainian forces are fighting Russian forces. Now the question is, which you are asking, if Russia strikes these convoys inside Ukrainian territory, then it is certainly a legitimate target and does not give any right to NATO to get into the war. Who's manning these vehicles is also again an important question. Russia had made it very clear they will not allow any soldier from NATO countries to operate inside Ukraine. If these vehicles are being manned by the NATO soldiers, then it's a direct interference of NATO as it is. And Russia had warned it right from the beginning of the war, they will not tolerate any kind of interference in this war by any other country. But a second question is, if Russia strikes these convoys outside the territory of Ukraine, then it is 100% that NATO will get involved in this, and this war will escalate beyond Ukraine.